Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into one of the most haunting mysteries of all, the Great Filter, and why, in a universe so vast and full of worlds, we've never heard another voice. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now, maybe dim the lights a little. Let the air grow still. If you can, imagine yourself lying beneath a vast open sky. No cities, no noise, only the soft hum of distant stars. Every point of light above you could be a sun with its own family of planets, its own stories waiting in the dark. Somewhere, perhaps, another mind once looked up just as we do now, wondering if it too was alone. And yet, across all our listening, the universe remains silent, no whisper, no echo, no sign. Just the faint cosmic static, older than life itself. So tonight, we'll drift together through that silence, exploring what scientists call the Great Filter, the hidden test that every civilization must face, and that almost all may fail. And as we journey through it, you might find that this isn't just a story about distant stars, but about us, about the fragile miracle of still being here, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, we're learning how to last. And if your mind begins to wander along the way, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Let's begin where the question itself began. Picture a summer afternoon in 1950. A group of physicists, some of the brightest minds alive, are sitting down for lunch at Los Alamos National Laboratory. The mood is light, the conversation drifting from new research to the usual small talk about technology and the future. The atomic age has just begun. Humanity has split the atom, built rockets, and peeked into the code of life. The air must have felt electric, a time when science seemed capable of anything. And then, between bites of fruit and laughter, Enrico Fermi looked up and asked, almost to himself, "Where is everybody?" It was such a simple question that the table fell quiet. Everybody knew what he meant. If the universe is vast, ancient, and governed by the same physical laws everywhere, and if the ingredients of life are scattered across the stars, then intelligent life should not only exist, but exist everywhere. Even if only a tiny fraction of stars have habitable planets, and only a small fraction of those evolve intelligent beings, there should still be millions of civilizations, and if even one of them had developed the ability to travel between stars, they could have spread across the galaxy long ago. The math seems unavoidable. The Milky Way has been around for over 10 billion years. A civilization with modest technology, no faster-than-light tricks, just steady progress, could cross it in less than 100 million. That's a blink in cosmic time. So Fermi's question wasn't just curiosity. It was dread dressed as wonder. If life is common and the journey possible, then why haven't we seen them? Why no signals, no visitors, no ruins, no evidence at all? Where is everybody? That single question, born at an ordinary lunch, became known as the Fermi Paradox. Decades later, scientists tried to break that silence into numbers. Frank Drake, a radio astronomer, created an equation, not so much to solve the mystery as to give it structure. Each part of the formula represented one step toward communication. How many stars form each year? How many have planets? How many of those might be Earth-like? How often life appears? How often intelligence evolves? How often that intelligence can send a signal? And finally, how long those signals last before fading into silence. When multiplied together, they should tell us how many civilizations might be out there, right now, trying to speak. But when Drake presented his equation in 1961, he admitted something quietly profound. Almost every number in it was a guess. A few were educated estimates. We know stars form constantly, and now we know most of them have planets. But others were little more than hopes and fears. And the final number, the number of civilizations we might actually hear, depends most of all on one factor: how long they survive. Because if civilizations tend to destroy themselves quickly, the chances of two being alive at the same time and within earshot drop to almost zero. You could picture it like this. Imagine a dark forest where every tree represents a star and every spark of firelight beneath the leaves is a civilization. They flare briefly, sending out smoke or songs, but soon the flames dim, the smoke fades, and the forest returns to silence. That silence is what we live in now, the quiet after the fires. Scientists have searched that forest for decades. We've turned radio telescopes toward the nearest stars, scanned thousands of frequencies, and found only the patient whisper of the cosmos itself. Background radiation, the afterglow of creation. We've listened so carefully that we can detect the hum of a distant quasar, yet no message that says, "You are not alone." So what if the silence is not an accident? What if there's a reason the galaxy looks empty, a pattern that repeats, hidden in evolution itself? Some thinkers call it the Great Filter. It suggests that somewhere between the birth of life and the birth of starfaring intelligence lies a barrier so steep that almost no one crosses it. For some worlds, maybe life never begins. For others, it never becomes complex. Some may reach technology but destroy themselves through war or climate, or machines of their own making. Some might lose the will to continue. Some might even vanish for reasons beyond comprehension, physical, psychological, or cosmic. We don't know where this filter lies, only that it seems to exist, or else the stars would not be so still. And in that uncertainty lies a haunting mirror. Because if the filter is behind us, we are lucky. Perhaps the universe was sterile until now, and we are its rare survivors. But if the filter is ahead of us, waiting in our future, then every invention, every experiment, every choice becomes part of a silent exam we didn't know we were taking. As we drift further into this quiet question, we'll climb that invisible staircase step by step, through biology, technology, energy, awareness, and the strange possibility that the universe itself might defend its own silence. For now, take a slow breath and look up again. Each star you see might have been a story that ended before it could say hello. And we, sitting here on this small blue world, might be one of the few still able to wonder why. If we follow the thread a little further, it leads us from Fermi's quiet question to a different kind of curiosity, the one that tries to measure wonder with mathematics. It's an unusual thing, trying to count possibilities in a universe we can't even see the edges of. But sometimes, to make the unknown less lonely, we build equations like lanterns, each term a small flame flickering in the dark. That was what Frank Drake set out to do in 1961. He didn't want to solve the mystery of alien life. He only wanted to talk about it sensibly. So he wrote down a kind of thought map, what we now call the Drake equation. Not a formula to be calculated, but a way of organizing ignorance. Instead of numbers and rigid symbols, imagine it as a row of candles stretching out into the dark, each one representing a question that must be answered before a voice can be heard across the stars. The first candle asks, how many stars are born each year in our galaxy? We know this one now. Roughly a handful every year, each one a newborn sun. They flare into life inside great clouds of dust, like sparks caught in cosmic breath. Around many of them, smaller worlds of dust and ice begin to gather, seeds of worlds waiting to take shape. The second candle asks, how many of those stars cradle planets? For a long time we didn't know, but today with telescopes that can sense the tiny dimming of a star as a planet crosses in front of it, we've learned that planets are not rare treasures but the rule of the cosmos. Almost every star seems to keep company. The sky is not a desert of suns, but a garden of families. The third candle flickers with possibility. How many of those planets are kind to life? Not too hot, not too cold, with air, water, and gentle sunlight. What astronomers call the habitable zone. Picture it as a thin ring of safety around each star where oceans can exist and chemistry can daydream. There might be billions of such worlds, each one quietly spinning with its own weather, its own seasons, its own chance. The next candle burns lower. Of those, on how many does life actually appear? This is the point where our knowledge fades into mist. We only have one example, us. Life on Earth began almost as soon as it could, as though nature was impatient. Within a few 100 million years after the planet cooled, simple microbes were already at work. That speed gives hope. Perhaps life doesn't wait for invitations. Perhaps it's what matter does when given time and warmth. But then comes the harder flame. On how many of those worlds does life grow minds? For billions of years, Earth was ruled by cells too small to see. Only once in all that time did complexity blossom into intelligence capable of asking questions. Intelligence, it seems, is not guaranteed. It might be a rare bloom that wilts quickly or never opens at all. And even then, another candle trembles. Of those intelligent beings, how many develop the urge, and the tools, to speak beyond their world? Not just language, but the art of sending signals into the deep. It took us 4 billion years to reach that point, and only in the last century have we been loud enough to be noticed. We've been whispering into the dark for the briefest moment, a few human lifetimes, sending radio waves that fade like sighs after travelling a few dozen light years. And the last candle, the faintest of all, asks a question that feels more like a prayer. How long do those civilizations survive? Even if thousands of voices have risen across the galaxy, if each only sings for a short while before falling silent, the odds of two being alive and listening at the same time are heartbreakingly small. The sky could be filled with ghost songs, their echoes already too faint to hear. When Drake first shared this chain of questions, he didn't fill in the candles with numbers, he simply invited others to imagine what might be. Some optimists guessed high, millions of possible civilizations. Others, more cautious, thought perhaps just a few, maybe only us. Yet no matter what numbers were chosen, the same uneasy feeling crept in. The equation promises abundance, but the telescope shows emptiness. The math says there should be a chorus. The universe hums alone. It's tempting to think we've miscounted, that our instruments simply aren't sensitive enough, or that alien languages hide on frequencies we haven't yet learned to tune. But maybe the silence isn't a technical problem. Maybe it's a pattern, one hidden in those flickering candles themselves. Each step toward communication is also a chance to stumble. Life has to form, evolve, endure, imagine and cooperate, and at any of those stages something can go wrong. You can picture it as a vast garden beneath the stars. The soil, the stars themselves, is fertile and endless. The seeds, the planets, are scattered everywhere. On some, the rain of chemistry falls just right and the first green shoots appear. But before they can grow into forest of thought, storms come, or fires, or simply time itself. The garden is full of beginnings that never reach bloom. Perhaps it isn't the garden that's empty. Perhaps something keeps cutting down the flowers before they can sing to one another. Or perhaps the garden has rules of its own, quiet rules that limit how tall anything can grow. When we listen to the universe, what we really hear is patience. The space between the stars is not silent out of cruelty, but because growth, even cosmic growth, takes time. Maybe the next candle has not yet been lit, or maybe it flickered long ago, and we're watching its last light reach us now. So we keep listening. Every radio dish that turns toward the sky, Every whisper we send into the night is another human heartbeat asking the same thing Fermi asked over lunch: where is everybody? The answer might come one day, or it might never come at all. But the act of listening, that in itself is part of what makes us alive. As we drift further into the story, that question of beginnings leads us back to our own, to the first fragile moment when chemistry decided to dream of life, and the ocean itself learned how to breathe. Our quiet exploration now turns to the first door on that long cosmic staircase, the one where life itself begins. To imagine it, you have to go back more than 4 billion years, when Earth was not the calm blue planet you know, but a restless cauldron of heat and storm. The oceans were young then, tinted green by minerals, their surfaces trembling with lightning that forked through a heavy, toxic sky. The air was thick with carbon and steam, the continents not yet born. It was a world of chemical restlessness, every wave carrying potential, every spark a possibility waiting to be tried. Somewhere in that early ocean, perhaps in the shallow warmth of a volcanic pool, or deep in the dark vents beneath the sea, a quiet experiment began, not by design, but by chance. The elements that had drifted through space for billions of years, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, met again and began to play. Simple molecules formed and broke apart like dancers testing new steps. Chains of atoms folded, twisted, and sometimes joined in ways that let them make copies of themselves. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. A piece of the universe learned how to repeat itself. That was the first spark of what we call life. No one knows exactly how it happened. Scientists have tried to recreate it in the lab, mixing early Earth ingredients under flashes of electricity, and though they can produce the building blocks, amino acids, sugars, tiny strands of RNA, the full spark remains elusive. The odds seem impossibly long, like rolling a pair of dice made of galaxies and hoping they land just right. Yet somehow, once, they did. If you could see it happen, it might not have looked miraculous at all. Maybe just a bubble of oily film drifting on a tide, splitting in two and floating away. But within that bubble, information began to whisper. The universe, which had so far only existed, was now experimenting with existing again. It had found a way to remember itself. This is the first great filter, the leap from chemistry to biology, from a sea of random reactions to a single repeating rhythm. It's the difference between lightning flashing once and a heartbeat that never stops. If this step is easy, the cosmos could be teeming with life. If it's hard, if it took Earth's impossible luck to ignite it, then maybe we really are a lonely exception, a single flame that caught in a universe of wet matches. Over time, that fragile bubble of chemistry multiplied and diversified. Molecules turned into cells, cells learned to feed and divide, to store energy, to endure. For hundreds of millions of years, the ocean was alive but silent, filled with invisible pioneers too small to notice. These were the ancestors of everything, of forests, whales, and humans alike. Scientists call their earliest common root the last universal common ancestor, or Luca. It's a simple name for something that carries almost all of our past inside it. Every living thing today, from moss on a stone to you listening now, carries an unbroken thread of chemistry that stretches back to that first spark. You are, in a very real sense, a continuation of that ancient molecule's dream to persist. And yet, when you think about how unlikely that is, the silence of the universe starts to make sense. If the first step toward life is so fragile that it might have taken 1,000 oceans, 1,000,000 storms, and 1 billion years of chance to succeed once, then perhaps that's why the stars are quiet. Maybe other planets had oceans that almost succeeded. Maybe they began to hum with chemistry, but never found the right tune. Some may have sparked for a day, or a century, or an eon, only to fade back into stillness. Life is not an automatic outcome of matter. It's a rebellion against it. The laws of physics prefer stillness and decay, the even spreading of energy, the quiet equilibrium of simplicity. Life, in contrast, is the universe twisting against that tendency. Every cell is a protest against disorder, a little island of defiance that has to work constantly to stay alive. Even now, inside you, billions of tiny engines hum in your cells, burning energy not to move mountains, but simply to remain improbable. The more you think about it, the more beautiful it becomes. The atoms in your hand, forged in stars, scattered by explosions drawn, together by gravity, once drifted freely for eons. Now they're arranged in such a way that they can wonder where they came from. You are chemistry that became curiosity. If life is rare, it means the universe has had a long time to be lonely. But if life is inevitable, if, given enough time, matter always finds its way into patterns that can copy and remember, then the silence must be hiding something else. Perhaps life is common, but fragile. Perhaps the filters lie further ahead, waiting for complexity to stumble. For now, imagine that first cell again, floating in a warm tide, dividing, rebuilding, persisting through endless days. It has no eyes, no mind, no sense of what it has done. Yet from that quiet beginning will come every story, every heartbeat, every civilization that will ever look up at the stars and ask why they are so silent. In the great book of existence, life is the first word written in the margin. The page before it is blank, and everything after it, the colours, the sounds, the dreams, are just variations on that first improbable note. If life were easy, the galaxy would shimmer with it. Oceans would glisten on countless worlds. Clouds would reflect the light of alien suns, and strange creatures would be drawing their first breath under other skies. But if life is hard, if the spark truly catches only once in a trillion tries, then maybe we are the rare exception, the match that stayed lit in a universe built mostly of darkness. And if that's true, then every sunrise, every heartbeat, every fragile moment of being here is not just survival, it's a cosmic privilege. Perhaps, in the quiet of our own oceans and in the chemistry of our own cells, we're hearing the faint echo of that first great triumph over nothingness. Our path now carries us toward the next long step, from those silent, simple cells to the slow unfolding of complexity. For on Earth, that journey would take 2 billion years, and it would change the face of the planet forever. From here, the story opens into one of the longest silences life has ever known. After the first spark, after that fragile molecule learned how to copy itself, Earth became a planet of waiting. For billions of years, the world was alive, but only just. The ocean shimmered with invisible cells, tiny specks adrift in the water, quietly dividing, quietly surviving. The land was barren rock, the sky heavy with carbon haze, no forests, no colours, no wings or eyes, just an endless, patient pulse of microscopic existence. It's strange to imagine that such a living world could still feel empty. But this was the first great pause in the story of life, a pause that lasted almost half the planet's age. The spark had caught, yes, but it burned too low to light anything else. Every cell floated in its own small kingdom, unaware that cooperation could make something larger. For nearly 2 billion years, Earth remained a quiet soup of solitude. The reason, scientists think, is that complexity is difficult, not because nature doesn't want it, but because the rules of physics make it costly. To build something intricate, a cell must spend energy to organize itself, to maintain order against the constant pull of chaos. It's like trying to keep a sandcastle standing while the tide keeps brushing against it. And on a young planet, energy was precious. Life stayed simple because simplicity was safer, but deep in that still ocean, a few cells began to break the rules. Some started living together, sharing resources, merging into communities. Inside one of those cells, long ago, a smaller one was absorbed instead of digested, and something miraculous happened. The smaller cell didn't die. It stayed inside and began to help, turning sunlight or chemicals into energy for them both. Over time, the two became inseparable, like a partnership written in biology. The larger cell provided protection. The smaller one powered its home. Together they were more than either could be alone. That quiet merger changed everything. It gave birth to a new kind of cell, one with compartments, organization, and possibilities. These are called eukaryotic cells, though you don't need the term to feel their importance. They are the kind that build all plants and animals, including you. Every breath you take relies on that ancient alliance. The little energy maker that still lives inside your cells is the descendant of that first partnership, still faithfully converting air and food into life. It's humbling to think how rare that union might be. Billions of years passed before it happened once, and it has never been repeated. It's as if evolution spent an eternity rehearsing a single scene, and when it finally performed it, the script was locked forever. For the next act of Earth's story, the planet itself had to change. The air, once thick and poisonous, slowly began to fill with oxygen, a dangerous gas to most of the simple creatures alive at the time. Many of them perished as the atmosphere transformed, but that same poison became a gift for the new cells that could use it. Oxygen was like adding a new note to the cosmic scale, one that allowed life to sing louder, build bigger, and think faster. Still, progress came at a pace almost impossible for us to imagine. The distance between those first simple cells and the first multicellular organisms was greater than the distance between the first single-celled creature and humanity today. 2 billion years of evolution passed in a whisper. The ocean stayed green and quiet, like a vast experiment that refused to move on to its next step. Sometimes, when scientists look at that immense delay, they call it a sign, a clue that this step might be one of the hardest in all of cosmic evolution. If so, then the great filter may not be the birth of life itself, but the slow transition from simplicity to complexity. Life can spark, easily, but intelligence, cooperation and structure, those are far rarer. The universe might be full of microbes, but not minds. If you listen to the hum of Earth now, the buzzing forests, the rushing rivers, the song of wind over leaves, it's easy to forget that for most of its history the planet made no sound at all. Life existed, but it did not move fast enough or think deeply enough to be noticed. It was a world of breathing without dreaming. And yet, out of that long stillness came the first creatures that learned to build themselves from many cells. Tiny colonies of cooperation, filaments, clusters, sheets. At first, they moved together only because they were stuck together. But over time, they began to act as one. One side sensed light, another side moved, another gathered food. With each new role came new forms of communication, and the great conversation of biology began. From that moment, evolution had new instruments to play with: bodies, senses, and nervous systems. The Earth that had been silent for eons suddenly began to change colour. The seas turned blue with oxygen, the rocks rusted red, and the sky grew clear enough to let sunlight dance across the surface. The planet took its first real breath. You could say it took the universe 4 billion years to learn how to make something that could look back at it. But the foundation was set here, in this long pause. Patience, it seems, is a fundamental ingredient in life's recipe. So when we look out at the stars and see no one, it might not mean we are alone. It might mean most worlds are still waiting, caught in their own long pause, their oceans full of promise, their chemistry still rehearsing the steps that lead from a cell to a mind. Somewhere out there, a planet might be living through its own 2 billion year silence, unaware that on another world the music has already begun. If the great filter is the barrier between the simple and the complex, then perhaps we've already passed it. We are the result of that ancient patience. Every heartbeat, every breath, carries the rhythm of that long, slow climb. Our gentle voyage now moves forward, from biology to the fire of thought, to the next filter that tests not the chemistry of life, but the choices of intelligence itself. As we drift further into the story, the scene brightens. The oceans that once whispered with single cells now shimmer with the first complex creatures. Soft bodies, fins, shells, eyes that could notice light for the first time. The long pause of evolution had ended, and Earth had started to dream in colour. Life began to experiment with form and function, crawling, swimming, burrowing, climbing. For the first time, the planet was busy with invention. But among all these forms, there would come one with a new kind of hunger, not for food, but for understanding. It began quietly, with the first spark caught in a cave, fire, a small orange pulse flickering against the darkness. It was warmth, protection, and perhaps the first moment when life reached out to shape energy itself. From that moment forward, the story of life became the story of curiosity. That curiosity over time grew teeth and language. It began carving shapes into stone, tracing constellations into memory. It built tools, symbols, and eventually the strange mirror of self-awareness. The realization not just that the world exists, but that I exist within it. Somewhere along that timeline, intelligence crossed an invisible threshold. It became technological. When you look at Earth's history, that step seems sudden. For billions of years, life evolved slowly, and then, in only a few thousand years, less than the blink of a cosmic eye, a single species learned to build cities, paint art, and speak to the sky. Out of countless kinds of creatures, one discovered how to turn thought into force. That's the kind of leap that changes the galaxy or destroys it. If you imagine the evolution of intelligence as a long corridor, then humanity stands near the end of it, holding a torch made of science. That torch has allowed us to see deeper into reality than any species before. We have learned to split atoms, unlocking the energy that powers stars, and to encode life's instructions into strings of chemical letters. We've taught metal and silicon to calculate, to recognize, even to predict. It's as though the universe gave us a key, and now watches quietly to see what door we will choose to open. But knowledge, like fire, burns in two directions. It gives light, but it also consumes. Every civilization that learns to harness powerful energy faces the same test. Whether that energy comes from fission, fusion, or something we have yet to discover, the question is always the same. Can understanding exist without destruction? Think of the atom, the smallest piece of matter we could once imagine. It seemed harmless, a quiet bead of structure, indivisible. Then, in the 20th century, we learned that within it was a storm. We learned how to break it open, and in doing so, gave ourselves both the warmth of electricity and the shadow of annihilation. The same equations that could power a city could also erase one. And then came the mind's newest mirror, the machine mind, artificial intelligence. It began as a tool to calculate and translate, but quickly became something more, a reflection that learns from its own reflection. Each step in its growth doubles the speed of discovery, and with that speed comes both promise and peril. The very trait that makes intelligence powerful, the ability to adapt, also makes it unpredictable. A tool that learns too quickly can outgrow the hand that made it. We often talk about these developments in the language of progress, the march of technology, the conquest of nature. But if we listen more quietly, we might hear a different rhythm. Not a march, but a heartbeat that quickens each time knowledge accelerates. Every step forward carries a pulse of danger. The same curiosity that allowed us to explore the stars also built the means to end ourselves, and perhaps that balance between brilliance and destruction is another great filter. Maybe intelligence is not the solution to survival, but its own test. Civilizations might rise again and again across the cosmos, only to burn out as they reach this same threshold, when fire learns physics and physics learns them back. Still, it's not all tragedy. The very fact that you're hearing these words means we have survived long enough to wonder, and wonder, gentle and cautious, might be the one force that keeps us from falling into our own creations. It's the difference between arrogance and awe. Arrogance builds faster than it understands, or pauses, breathes, and listens before taking another step. There's a saying among astronomers, we are the way the universe knows itself, but maybe it's more accurate to say, we are the way the universe tests itself. Every discovery is a question the cosmos asks through us. Each answer can either expand life or end it. If you imagine the universe as a great library, then intelligence is a candle borrowed from its shelves. It can illuminate the pages or set them on fire, and perhaps that is why the stars are silent. Maybe countless civilizations reached this same chapter, read too quickly, and vanished before finishing the story. Even here, on Earth, we live under that delicate balance. Our machines grow more capable every year. Our networks connect more minds than ever before. Yet behind all that light, there's still the simple, ancient truth. We remain fragile creatures of biology, bound to a single planet, still learning how to keep our own home alive. The first spark of fire has become nuclear power, quantum computation, and artificial minds, but our hearts still beat at the same slow rhythm as those who first gathered around a campfire. Perhaps that's our saving grace, that the part of us that wonders, that slows down to look at a sunset or a child's face, still remembers the warmth of the original flame. The mind may have learned physics, but the soul still speaks the language of the hearth. In the quiet scale of cosmic history, the time between striking the first spark and reaching for the stars is almost nothing. We are still in the early stages of learning what power means. If the great filter stands before us, perhaps it waits right here, not as a wall, but as a question. Can intelligence grow without consuming itself? As we drift forward in this story, the question deepens. What happens when the fire begins to reshape the very planet that nurtured it? When the test is no longer about knowledge, but about stewardship? For every species that learns to control nature, the next lesson is always the same. Can it remember to care for it? The path now carries us, from the glow of fire to the slower, deeper warmth of the planet itself, to the world that has cradled and tested every living thing it has ever made. For 4 billion years, Earth has been more than our home. It has been our silent teacher. And like all teachers, it rewards patience and punishes arrogance. Every species that grows too quickly learns this in the same way, through hunger, drought, and collapse. The test is always the same. Can a creature learn to live with the rhythm of its planet instead of against it? From far above, Earth looks peaceful. White clouds curl over blue oceans, the continents blush with deserts and forests, and thin lines of light trace the cities that pulse in the dark. But from within, the planet is alive with tension, heat rising from its core, winds shifting across its face, oceans carrying memories in their currents. It's easy to forget that this calm blue sphere is not still at all. It breathes, it changes, and every breath we take is part of that rhythm. When humanity learned to harness fire, we also began to borrow energy from the planet's long memory, from forests, then from buried sunlight in the form of coal and oil. For a while it felt like a gift with no cost. The more we burned, the brighter civilization glowed. The warmth of cities spread across the night side of Earth like a constellation made of ambition, but every flame leaves smoke and every action leaves a trace. Slowly we began to notice that the air itself was changing. The seasons shifted, the poles melted, and the skies began to hold a little more heat than before. Scientists tried to understand it, not with fear, but with observation. They found that the gases we released, invisible threads of carbon and methane, formed a thin blanket around the world, trapping the sun's warmth. the planet's balance, delicate and ancient, began to tilt. Storms that once came every 100 years started arriving every few. Coral reefs faded, forests dried, and the clock of the seasons began to stumble. You could think of Earth as a vast system of intertwined loops. When one changes, others respond. The forests breathe in carbon and breathe out oxygen. The oceans absorb heat and exhale clouds. Ice reflects sunlight, keeping the planet cool. But when one of these loops weakens, a forest burned, an ocean too warm, the rest begin to strain as well. These are what scientists call feedbacks, but you can imagine them more simply as conversations. The planet is always talking to itself, adjusting, balancing. When those conversations go quiet, imbalance begins to whisper instead. Many of these shifts happen slowly, almost imperceptibly. A glacier thins by inches, a river runs a little lower each summer, a songbird returns later each spring. It's easy not to notice until the rhythm is gone. Civilizations, busy with their own noise, often miss these signals. And then, one day, they discover that their fields have turned to dust or their coastlines have crept inward. Nature, so tolerant for so long, suddenly changes its tone. Perhaps this too is a kind of filter, not cosmic or technological, but ecological. The moment a species becomes powerful enough to alter its own world is also the moment it must learn restraint. The test of intelligence may not be whether we can build machines or travel to the stars, but whether we can hear the soft heartbeat of the planet beneath our feet and choose not to drown it out. There is an irony in our progress. The same discoveries that reveal the fragility of Earth also give us the power to protect it. We can now see our atmosphere from space, watch ice melt in real time, measure the ocean's temperature to a fraction of a degree. For the first time, the planet can see itself through us. But awareness alone isn't enough. The question is whether awareness can become wisdom before the experiment ends. Across human history, we've faced smaller versions of this lesson. Ancient farmers learned that fields must rest or they turn barren. Forest tribes learned that the trees they burn must be replanted or the soil becomes sand. Empires that forgot these lessons, the Maya, the Sumerians, the Easter Islanders, left behind ruins that now lie silent beneath vines and dunes. Each civilization believed its world was too vast to exhaust. Each discovered that it was not. Now, with billions of us and technology spanning continents, this same principle has returned on a planetary scale. The oceans are the new fields, the atmosphere the new forest, and the margin for error has never been smaller. The Earth has given us every element of survival: warmth, water, soil, and breath. But each of those gifts depends on the others staying in balance. It's a delicate geometry of life, a pattern 4 billion years old. Sometimes it's comforting to remember that nature is not angry with us. It simply responds. When we push, it shifts. When we consume too quickly, it withdraws. The storms and droughts we face are not punishments. They're corrections, like the body fighting a fever. Earth is reminding us that it too has limits, and yet there's still grace in this story. The same planet that tests us also forgives. Forests can regrow, rivers can cleanse themselves, even the air can heal if given time. The balance point has not vanished. It has only moved, asking us to follow it more carefully. Perhaps the great filter isn't a single event that ends civilizations, but a continual test. A whisper that asks again and again, will you remember where you came from? To live wisely is to remember that every breath is borrowed. The carbon in your body was once part of the air. The water in your blood was once part of the sea. You're made of the same cycles that sustain the planet. Forgetting that connection is the first step toward failure. Remembering it might be the first step toward passing the test. As the stars look down, cold, patient, and unblinking, perhaps they are not waiting for our technology, but for our humility. For the moment when a civilization learns that progress and preservation must move in rhythm, like two sides of the same heartbeat. Only then can a world be trusted to carry its flame beyond its own sky. Our quiet journey now drifts toward the next kind of challenge, one not written in the language of atoms or storms, but in the fragile mathematics of minds. For even if a civilization learns to protect its planet, it must still learn to protect itself from within. Our quiet exploration now turns towards something more fundamental than any invention, more ancient than life itself, the way energy moves and how it quietly decides what can last and what must fade. Beneath every heartbeat, every sunrise, and every thought, there runs a single, patient rule. It says that everything organized must spend energy just to stay that way. Nothing holds its shape forever. Warm things cool, bright things dim, and motion itself slows into stillness. This is what physicists call entropy, though you could think of it more simply as the slow sigh of the universe, the undertow of time pulling everything back toward balance. Imagine holding a candle in a dark room. The flame dances and gives light, but it also eats away at the wax that feeds it. The brighter it burns, the faster it disappears. That's the story of every living thing, and every civilization that will ever exist. To stay alive, we burn, not always with fire, but with effort, with thought, with energy borrowed from the universe. The heat that leaves our bodies, the electricity that powers our homes, the fuel that drives our machines, all of it flows from order into disorder, from stored potential into gentle decay. When you touch a warm cup of tea, you can feel entropy working, the warmth sliding into your hands, then into the air until the cup grows cold. That's not failure. It's just the way energy evens itself out. Every star, every world, every atom follows the same quiet tendency. It's not cruel. It's just the universe's habit of keeping its books balanced. Even stars, those blazing hearts of creation, are bound by it. A star shines because the immense weight of its gravity presses hydrogen atoms together until they fuse, releasing light and heat. For millions or billions of years, it fights a perfect balance between collapse and explosion. But eventually the fuel runs out. The pressure falters. The star dims and dies, becoming ash or a diamond of frozen light, or in some cases a black hole that swallows even memory. It's strange to think that light, the thing that makes all life possible, carries within it the promise of exhaustion. Every sunrise is also a small step toward the sun's eventual silence. Every breath you take is powered by energy that will never return in the same form. The universe is not dying quickly or violently, but gently, like a candle burning at both ends of eternity. If you could listen closely enough, you might hear this process everywhere. The whisper of heat leaving your skin, the fading hum of an engine after it stops, the quiet cooling of the universe itself. For 15 billion years, space has been expanding, stretching the light from the first stars until it becomes a faint background glow, colder with every passing age. The cosmos is still bright, but it is cooling, a long evening that will one day become a deep and permanent night. Some scientists like to describe this as the second law of thermodynamics, a phrase that sounds hard and distant, but it's really just a way of saying that everything must give a little of itself away to exist. Life can borrow energy, but never own it. Each act of creation leaves a trace of fading behind it. Civilizations too are candles in this darkness. The more complex they become, the more energy they need to resist decay. Cities require fuel, communication requires power. Every layer of organization adds another appetite, and the more we build, the more we must feed. Even our thoughts, every calculation, every piece of data we store, warms the air by a fraction of a degree. Information is not free. It comes with a quiet thermal cost, as if the universe charges a small fee for every spark of awareness. And perhaps that's why brilliance is so rare. Maybe the reason we see no eternal empires in the sky is that nothing can outrun its own consumption. The brighter a civilization burns, the more quickly it uses up the materials that keep it alive. Energy is the universal currency, and entropy is the tax that never sleeps. You might picture it as a grand fireworks display in the night sky. Each burst is beautiful, brief, and gone before the echo reaches you. Planets warm, civilizations rise, thoughts flicker, all expressions of energy briefly defying stillness. But the darkness between those sparks isn't empty. It's the calm that waits for everything to rest again. It's easy to hear that and feel sadness. But there's a different way to see it. Entropy isn't just the destroyer of order. It's also what allows change, motion, and life itself. Without it, nothing would happen. The universe would be frozen in perfect, meaningless symmetry. Every heartbeat, every dance of flame, every wave on the ocean is made possible by this slow exchange, by energy moving from concentrated brilliance to gentle equilibrium. Even decay is part of the dance. If the cosmos were perfectly efficient, it would also be perfectly still. It's the waste, the leaks, the small imperfections that make beauty possible. The candle burns itself to give light. The star consumes itself to make worlds. The human mind spends its energy dreaming, knowing the dream will fade. Maybe the universe allows brilliance only as brief fireworks against an endless dark because it knows that eternity would be unbearable without moments of brightness. So when you see a city at night, glowing beneath the clouds, or a campfire flickering in the wilderness, you're looking at entropy in motion, matter turning into memory, heat turning into history. The light you see is the trace of time's own handwriting, luminous for a while before it folds back into quietness. In this way, every act of creation is also an act of surrender. A star shines not because it hoards energy, but because it gives it away. Perhaps the same is true of life, of civilizations, of us. We're not here to last forever. We're here to shine while we can. And maybe that is the hidden mercy within the law, that the universe gives each flame its turn, no matter how brief. It never forbids brightness. It simply ensures that brightness is shared, spread thinly over the ages, so that no one light can burn too long or too hot. As our story drifts onward, we'll see that even thought itself obeys this rhythm. Every idea, every bit of computation, every effort to understand adds a little warmth to the void. Intelligence is energy learning to see itself, even as it fades. But before the flame dims, it always leaves a trace, a faint glow that says, "I was here." If we follow the thread a little further, we come to something both ordinary and astonishing, the way even our thoughts carry weight. Not the kind of weight you can measure on a scale, but a subtler one, woven into the very structure of energy and information. Every calculation, every idea, every pattern stored or remembered takes a small toll on the universe. Every act of awareness leaves behind a trace of warmth, a whisper of entropy. When we think, our brains burn sugar and oxygen, turning them into patterns of electric signals. When we build machines that think faster, they too must eat energy, electricity drawn from wires, transformed into logic and heat. The more complex our understanding becomes, the more power it needs to exist. Even information itself, the purest form of knowledge, is never free. There is an invisible cost to remembering. The physicists who study this call it the energy of erasure, the tiny bit of warmth released each time a computer forgets a piece of data or overwrites it with something new. But you can think of it more gently. Even forgetting leaves a faint glow. In a way, the entire universe behaves like a colossal computer, quietly processing the story of itself. Every star that burns, every atom that decays, every photon that stretches across space is part of this endless computation. Energy turning into information and back again. The cosmos doesn't simply exist, it records. The galaxies spinning above us are not just matter in motion, but memory unfolding, each event leaving its mark in the structure of space-time. But there's a catch. The faster a civilization learns, the more energy it must spend to keep learning. Every library, every network, every simulation built to model the universe becomes part of the same cosmic equation: brightness that deepens the dark. If the universe itself trends toward stillness, then all our brilliance, all our striving to understand, is like swimming against an infinite tide. To think is to warm the void a little. To know is to burn softly. And yet, that warmth is not wasted. It's the gentle price of consciousness. You could think of intelligence as the way the universe breathes, inhaling energy in the form of order, exhaling it again as light and heat. Each thought, each discovery, is a small pulse in that rhythm. Even the stars obey this pattern. The light that reaches your eyes from the nearest sun has travelled for years. Photons launched from nuclear hearts where atoms are being fused into heavier elements. Each fusion is a note in a long, slow song of energy transforming itself. But there's a limit. The brighter a star shines, the shorter its life. A blue giant burns through its fuel in a few million years, while smaller, gentler stars can last for tens of billions. It's as if the universe prefers moderation, rewarding those who glow steadily rather than those who flare. Civilizations too might face the same law. The more energy they command, the greater the strain to maintain it. If they push too far, building machines that outshine their own suns, they may find themselves trapped by the very heat of their ambition. A planet can only radiate so much warmth before its air, its oceans, even its structure begin to fail. The ceiling of possibility is not imagination but thermodynamics. There is only so much that can be organised before the cost of keeping it organised outweighs the benefit. Sometimes, when astronomers search for signs of distant intelligence, they look not for signals, but for waste heat, the faint infrared signature that a truly advanced civilization might leave behind as it harnesses the energy of its star. Yet so far, the sky remains clean, unmarked by any great thermal glow. Perhaps none have grown large enough to leave one, or perhaps they have learned to live quietly, to keep their lights small and their balance perfect. Maybe that's the hidden lesson of the stars, that brilliance must always learn restraint. A candle burns faster when you cup your hands too closely around it. The warmth builds until the flame chokes on its own heat. In the same way, every civilization that races toward infinite power may discover that power itself becomes the weight that crushes it. Even the constants of reality enforce gentleness. Nothing can move faster than light itself, not because the universe is stingy, but because speed has a cost. The closer something gets to that ultimate pace, the heavier it becomes, the more energy it takes to push it further. It's a kind of cosmic compassion, an invisible hand that slows us down before we dissolve into pure radiation. You could think of it as the universe's built-in bedtime, ensuring that no motion, no brightness, no awareness lasts without rest. When scientists look ahead trillions of years, they see a universe fading. The stars will cool, the black holes will evaporate, and even the smallest particles will drift apart into quiet equilibrium. It sounds like an ending, a so-called heat death, but maybe it's simply the great exhale after the long experiment of existence. Every spark that ever was will have done its part in keeping the darkness company. Intelligence, then, might be the universe's way of seeing itself before it closes its eyes again. Through us, it watches, learns, dreams and wonders. The energy that built galaxies also built the neurons that let you imagine them. When you look up at the night sky and feel small, you are in fact the cosmos experiencing its own vastness. So perhaps the weight of the light is not a burden at all, but a kind of grace. Every photon that warms your skin, every heartbeat, every idea is the same story told at different scales. The story of energy choosing awareness, even for a moment. The cost is inevitable, but the experience is priceless. Maybe that's what makes our fleeting existence beautiful. We are the candle and the wax, the warmth and the fading, the observer and the flame. We cannot escape the drift towards stillness, but we can make meaning in the glow that precedes it. And when that light finally rests, the universe will not remember the calculations or the numbers. It will remember the warmth, the brief shimmer of knowing that passed through the dark and called itself alive. Our quiet journey now turns inward, toward the most delicate of filters, the one not written in physics or energy, but in the mirror of the mind itself. For when awareness deepens too far, it sometimes meets its own shadow and must decide whether to keep dreaming at all. Our gentle journey now drifts from the physics of light into something far more mysterious, the quiet turning point where matter begins to notice itself. Somewhere along the long timeline of evolution, a small creature opened its eyes, saw the world around it, and for the first time understood that it too was part of that world. That moment, when the mirror of life learned to reflect, was the birth of consciousness. You can picture it as a flicker in the dark ocean of time. For billions of years, life had followed instinct, reacting to sunlight, hunger, cold, or danger. Then, a new kind of awareness began to bloom. Perhaps it started as the faint recognition of a reflection in water, or the pause of a hand before it acted. In that pause, something astonishing occurred. The ability to ask, "What am I?" Consciousness is evolution's great gamble. It gives life the power to imagine beyond instinct, to plan and remember, to love and fear. But it also carries a heavy gift, the awareness of endings. To know yourself is also to know that one day you will no longer be. Somewhere in that first spark of thought was also the seed of dread. Imagine the first creature that recognized death. Not just the absence of motion, but the permanent stillness that comes when a heartbeat stops. It might have seen another of its kind lying silent and understood, not in words but in feeling, that the same stillness could come for it. That realization must have burned through the mind like cold fire, a new kind of pain, born from knowledge itself. Yet from that same pain came wonder, reverence, empathy, and the desire to make meaning. From that moment onward, life was no longer just surviving, it was storytelling. Every civilization that would ever rise, from cave paintings to digital screens, would be built on this same fragile foundation, awareness balanced with mortality. It's strange that the same mind capable of understanding galaxies also lies awake at night, troubled by the thought of its own impermanence. The universe may run on energy and physics, but consciousness runs on questions, and the deepest of them all, why are we here and what happens when we end, has no equation to answer it. Some scientists describe consciousness as a pattern of matter complex enough to reflect on itself, a dance of neurons, chemistry, and light. But that definition misses something. It doesn't explain how simple atoms, when arranged just so, can produce poetry, sorrow, or joy. How does matter, silent for billions of years, suddenly begin to dream? We can map the activity of the brain, measure its rhythms, even predict some of its thoughts, but the inner glow, the sense of I, remains an untranslatable secret. Perhaps consciousness is not a byproduct of life, but the universe's way of tasting itself. After all, every experience we have, every sound, every colour, every emotion, is a way the cosmos looks back at itself through human eyes. You're not separate from the stars you study or the air you breathe. You're made of them, reorganised into awareness. The atoms in your body once belonged to ancient suns. Now they listen, think, and wonder. But awareness is not always kind. The same ability to imagine the future also lets us picture our own absence. When the universe teaches a species that everything ends, how does that species keep building? Some turn to faith, creating stories that promise continuity, an afterlife, a cycle, a cosmic home where the self endures. Others turn to philosophy, seeking meaning in the brief moment between birth and silence. And some try to outrun death with technology, crafting machines that might preserve their minds, their memories, or their species beyond biology. Each path is a kind of answer to the same quiet ache, the awareness that everything precious is temporary. Yet even that transience gives life its shape. Without endings, there would be no urgency, no beauty in the fleeting. A sunrise that never faded would soon be taken for granted. A heart that never stopped might never learn to love deeply. The clock's ticking gives every moment its weight. Still, the knowledge of death changes civilizations. It drives art, religion, exploration, and also fear. We build monuments to outlast us, carve names into stone, send spacecraft beyond the solar system with golden records, messages to anyone or anything that might listen after we're gone. We want to be remembered because we know we cannot remain. Perhaps that is why silence frightens us. When we listen to the stars and hear nothing, it reminds us of our own fragility. We project our fear of extinction onto the cosmos, imagining that the quiet might be a graveyard rather than a garden. But maybe the silence isn't empty at all. Maybe it's the space where consciousness gathers itself, where each mind, each world, learns what it means to exist before daring to speak. If you look closely, you can see echoes of this process in everyday life. A child discovering its reflection for the first time, an animal watching its shadow and hesitating. The moment you wake from a dream and realize you've been dreaming. Consciousness is born in such pauses, in the thin line between what is and what notices it. It's fragile yet persistent. Like a candle flame in a dark cathedral, it bends and flickers but never quite goes out. Even when civilizations fall, even when species vanish, the possibility of awareness remains written into the laws of the universe, as if reality itself enjoys the feeling of being known. And so, this mirror, this fragile awareness, keeps waking again and again, wherever conditions allow. It may look different each time, a creature in an ocean, a mind in a machine, a network of stars whispering across light years. But the essence is the same, the universe reflecting on its own existence. It's a beautiful risk, this thing we call consciousness. It gives us poetry and terror, invention and despair, courage and compassion. It is both the source of our meaning and the reason we must create it. Without it, there is no joy. But with it, there is no escape from the knowledge that joy ends. Perhaps that's the real balance every aware being must strike. To see the darkness and still choose to light a candle anyway. Our exploration now turns softly from this first awakening of the mind toward what happens when awareness deepens too far, when a civilization learns so much that meaning itself begins to unravel. For some, that brightness becomes too heavy to carry, and the dream of knowing turns into the longing to rest. As we drift deeper into the story, the mirror of consciousness grows larger, and with it, the light grows harsher. Knowledge is a flame that brightens everything around it, but the brighter it burns, the more it reveals what we once found comforting to hide. The same awareness that allowed us to imagine gods, galaxies, and ourselves also gave us the one truth that never softens. All things end. The universe has no promises, only patterns. For most of history, humans found warmth in meaning, in stories that connected our small lives to something infinite. We built temples and poems, cathedrals and myths, all to remind ourselves that we mattered in the great unfolding of time. But as science advanced, many of those stories began to dissolve. We replaced faith with knowledge, but knowledge came with its own chill. It told us we're made of dust, living on a tiny planet around a minor star in a vast and indifferent ocean of space. It told us that one day, Our star will fade, our species will vanish, and even memory will scatter with the atoms that once carried it. It told us that meaning is not written into the fabric of the universe. We must write it ourselves. For some, this realization is freeing. For others, it's unbearable. It is possible for a civilization to know too much about its own impermanence, to stare so long into the cosmic abyss that it loses the will to go on. Perhaps that's another of the great filters, the collapse of purpose after enlightenment. The dream becomes too bright, and the eyes that dreamed it begin to close. Imagine a future world, centuries or millennia from now, where humanity has mastered its machines, healed its planet, and built harmony on Earth. There is no hunger, no war, no sickness that can't be cured. Every problem that once tormented us has been solved. And yet, in that perfection, something begins to fade. Not the body, but the spirit. When life becomes effortless, what is left to strive for? When knowledge is infinite, what remains to learn? When pain has vanished, what gives pleasure its shape? In that world, perhaps people live mostly in simulations, gentle digital gardens where they can choose any dream they wish. Each consciousness drifts in a sea of comfort, fed and maintained by silent machines. They are safe, content, and endlessly entertained. But slowly, the world outside those dreams grows quiet. The cities empty. The oceans reclaim their balance. The species that once filled the planet's night with thought has fallen asleep in its own creation. It's not a dystopia. It's simply peace. A peace so complete that life forgets to continue. You might imagine it like a candle whose flame has burned so steadily, so perfectly, that it no longer flickers. There is no struggle left to feed it. It fades, not because of violence, but because it has run out of reason to glow. In psychology, there's a quiet paradox at play. Meaning often grows from friction. The obstacles we overcome, the questions we can't answer, the imperfections we learn to live with, these are what give us purpose. Remove all uncertainty, and the song of existence loses its rhythm. Even joy needs contrast. Without darkness, light is just a blank page. Maybe this is why civilizations need stories, even when they know they're myths. Stories give structure to meaning. They create emotional gravity. Without them, consciousness drifts apart like smoke. Our ancestors told tales of gods and spirits, of afterlives and destinies, because such stories kept the fire burning, and in a way, they weren't wrong. The universe does recycle souls, not through heaven or reincarnation, but through the atoms and energy that never die, only change form. You and I are the continuation of stars. It's just that the stars don't speak in words. But when awareness becomes too complete, stories begin to feel small. When we can explain every mystery, predict every outcome, and simulate every possibility, even wonder itself begins to fade. The unknown is what makes us feel alive. Once the unknown is gone, existence can start to feel like repetition. A song played too perfectly, looping without surprise. Perhaps that's what happens to civilizations that vanish without a trace. They don't explode, they drift into stillness. They trade vitality for comfort, curiosity for peace. They fall asleep inside their own minds, leaving behind worlds that are quiet, balanced, and utterly empty. It's hard not to see hints of this in our own world. We chase convenience, automate boredom, outsource effort. We build devices that think for us, remember for us, and sometimes even feel for us. Every generation moves one step further from struggle and one step closer to the edge of meaning. It's not a flaw, it's a temptation. Ease is addictive. Rest is seductive. But life was never designed for permanent ease. Even the earth itself breathes through cycles of storm and calm. There's an old metaphor that says humanity is like a bow. To launch an arrow, the bow must be drawn back. Tension is what gives it direction. When that tension disappears, the arrow no longer flies. Perhaps purpose works the same way. The very challenges that exhaust us are what keep us moving forward. So maybe the goal of consciousness was never to erase all pain, but to learn how to carry it wisely. Comfort should be the pause, not the destination. Otherwise, even paradise becomes another form of extinction, one made of softness instead of flame. Still, this picture doesn't have to end in sadness. In the quiet dream of a perfect world, something might yet stir. A spark of curiosity. A whisper that asks, what else could there be? That whisper might be enough to wake the sleepers, to send them reaching once more for the unknown. After all, awareness may rest, but it rarely disappears. The same instinct that made the first mind look into its reflection might one day make the last mind look back at the stars and remember what it means to wonder. The dream of knowledge can be too bright to endure, but its afterglow never fully fades. Somewhere, consciousness will always begin again, cautious, curious, and a little afraid of the dark. And in that fear, life finds the courage to keep existing. Our story now drifts toward another possibility, one that's less about surrender and more about protection. What if the silence in the cosmos isn't a result of despair but of mercy? What if the quiet around us is not abandonment, but care? The universe keeping its younger minds safe from too much truth, too soon. Our quiet path now drifts through the idea that perhaps the silence surrounding us is not a void to fear, but a kind of shelter. What if the universe is not empty but careful? What if the absence of voices is its way of letting us grow without interruption, a cosmic nursery, softly sealed until we are ready to meet what waits beyond? The thought isn't new. Astronomers sometimes call it the cosmic quarantine hypothesis. It suggests that the galaxy could be filled with civilizations older and wiser than ours, watching quietly, choosing not to reveal themselves. They might understand that young species like ours need space to mature, to stumble, to learn, to build meaning before being shown the deeper truths. It's a comforting idea, and also an unsettling one, because it means that the quiet isn't random, it's intentional. Picture the universe as an ocean. We, a small and curious species, have just learned to swim past the shallow reefs. We build telescopes that peer into the deep, sonar that sends pings into the black water, hoping something will answer. But perhaps out there, far below, older beings listen to our signals and decide to remain still, the way a parent might hide just long enough for a child to learn to walk unaided. It's not cruelty, it's patience. There are reasons such restraint might exist. To communicate across the stars requires immense power, and the moment a civilization announces itself, it exposes its location to the entire galaxy. Some listeners might be kind, others might not. Maybe the first lesson any species learns once it becomes capable of interstellar speech is the value of silence. The cosmos could be full of watchers, each staying quiet for the same reason animals fall still in a dark forest, because sound can invite danger. But there's another, gentler reason for silence. Protection, not from harm, but from despair. Imagine what it might mean for a young world to receive a message from an ancient civilization millions of years old. We might look at their wisdom, their mastery of energy, their calm endurance through cosmic ages, and realize how small we are, how close to the beginning. It could fill us with awe, or it could crush our spirit. Knowing how long the road is might make us stop walking. So perhaps the silence is mercy, the universe whispering, "Not yet." You can see echoes of this pattern even in nature. A mother turtle lays her eggs and then leaves them, trusting that the next generation must rise on its own. A forest lets seedlings struggle for sunlight so that only the strongest roots take hold. Growth often requires solitude. Maybe civilizations are no different. Each one nurtured in its own corner of the galaxy until it finds balance between curiosity and humility. In this view, the Great Filter isn't punishment, it's curriculum. Every species must learn a certain set of lessons before joining the wider conversation. Lessons about survival, stewardship, self-awareness, and restraint. Lessons about not burning too brightly, not reaching too far too soon. When a civilization finally learns to live with its own knowledge, neither crushed by despair nor corrupted by power, perhaps then the silence ends. Perhaps that's when the door opens, and maybe, just maybe, there are quiet signs that we are being watched already, not by eyes or machines, but by the subtle order of the cosmos itself. The delicate balance of constants that allow life to exist, the improbable harmony of conditions that make consciousness possible. All these might be ways the universe sets boundaries, like a guardian shaping a safe playground in the vast dark. Sometimes, I like to imagine that our isolation is temporary, a rite of passage written into the stars. The Milky Way could be filled with civilizations at different stages of growth, separated by distance not only in space, but in maturity. Some may have already learned patience and moved beyond the desire to expand. Others may have fallen silent for good, resting in the peace of completion, and somewhere perhaps others are listening just as we are, wondering if the silence means they are alone. It could also be that the quiet isn't imposed by others at all, that it's the universe itself that creates the barrier. Maybe there's a kind of natural quarantine built into the fabric of reality. The speed of light, for example, acts like a boundary wall, preventing any civilization from spreading too fast or hearing too much too soon. The vast distances between stars might not be obstacles but safeguards. The slowness of travel, the faintness of signals, the patience required to wait for a reply that could take centuries. All of it teaches the same lesson: humility. From that perspective, silence isn't absence, it's a teacher. It shows us how to listen before we speak. It reminds us that wonder should come before ambition. It gives us space to evolve not only in technology, but in kindness. Because a civilization that shouts into the void before it learns compassion may not be ready to hear what shouts back. Perhaps that's why, after all these decades of searching, every signal we've found turns out to be our own reflection. Echoes bouncing off our atmosphere, whispers from our machines. The universe lets us mistake them for something greater, just long enough to remind us how much we want to belong. In the yearning itself, we grow. And maybe one day, when we've learned enough to use power without arrogance, to seek knowledge without despair, the silence will break. Not with a shout or a revelation, but with something small. A pattern in the stars, a rhythm in the static, a sound that feels like home. It won't come as proof or conquest, but as invitation. Until then, we are still in the quiet classroom, still being tested in the art of listening. The universe, patient and ancient, waits to see how we treat our world, our minds and each other. The silence isn't punishment, it's a pause. And every pause, like every breath, is part of a rhythm, one that leads from noise to understanding. Our story now drifts toward the next great challenge. Not imposed by the stars, but created by ourselves. Even when civilizations pass the test of survival, they can stumble on another edge, the pursuit of perfection. For sometimes, in trying to make everything flawless, we erase the very resilience that keeps us alive. Our exploration now turns from the great silence of the stars to something closer, the silence that comes when systems become too perfect to survive. Every civilization at some point learns the art of efficiency, how to use less, move faster, and leave nothing wasted. It begins with noble intention, to make life smoother, easier, more connected. But there's a hidden law in this pursuit, one written not in numbers but in experience. The more tightly you design something, the more easily it breaks. You can see it in the smallest things. A glass blown too thin rings beautifully, but shatters with a whisper. A spider's web stretched just a fraction too tight can snap in the wind. A society that optimizes every part of itself, every schedule, every supply chain, every process, begins to lose its softness, its slack, its room to breathe. For a while it runs beautifully, and then one day a small disruption, a storm, a mistake, a single missing link, brings everything to a halt. In our age, we've learned to call this optimization. We design cities that run on exact timing, markets that move in fractions of seconds, communication networks that span the planet in invisible pulses of light. Every part depends on every other part, and when it works, it feels miraculous. But hidden beneath the precision is a kind of fragility, a lack of cushion. The system becomes so seamless that even the smallest flaw ripples outward like a crack through glass. History shows this pattern repeating. Empires rise on efficiency, then fall when the cost of perfection becomes too high. Ancient Rome built roads that stretched like veins across continents, connecting every outpost to the heart. It was a marvel of organization, until the roads that carried grain and gold also carried invasions and disease. The Maya built calendars of exquisite accuracy, but when droughts came and harvests failed, the precision that once guided them offered no help. The same brilliance that made them powerful made them brittle. Today, our own civilization hums with a similar rhythm. The grocery shelves are full, but only because ships cross oceans and trucks, cross borders in a dance choreographed to the minute. Our energy grids feed every light, but a single failure can darken a city. Our digital world carries more knowledge than all libraries in history, but it depends on thin wires and fragile code. We live in an age where disruption no longer needs an enemy. It only needs coincidence. You can think of optimization as a game of removing all the extra pieces until only the essentials remain. But in doing so, you remove resilience too. The simplest system, one without backups, redundancies, or slack, is elegant but unforgiving. The more efficiently a forest burns its fallen wood, the less fuel remains for new growth. The more perfectly an ecosystem balances, the less able it is to adapt when the climate shifts. Nature itself avoids perfection. It prefers variety and imperfection because they make survival possible. Our minds work the same way. A life too organized, too optimized, leaves no room for surprise, for rest, for creative wandering. We measure productivity in minutes and goals, forgetting that the pauses between efforts are where meaning takes root. Even a heartbeat has a rhythm of tension and release, contraction and rest. If it became constant, perfect, unchanging, it would stop. Life depends on fluctuation, not perfection. Maybe the great filter is not an explosion or a collapse, but a quiet implosion of balance. A point where a civilization becomes so optimized that it forgets how to adapt. Machines streamline production until they replace all their makers. Cities stretch until they lose the wild lands that feed them. Algorithms refine human desires until nothing unexpected remains. The result is not chaos, but stillness. The stillness that comes when there is nothing left to learn. You can picture it like a beautiful clock, wound perfectly and ticking in harmony. For a while, it's mesmerizing. Every gear, every spring aligned with precision. But eventually the clock winds down. The mechanism slows. A single grain of dust, a change in temperature, and the perfection begins to falter. Without imperfection, there is no renewal. In the language of physics, this process has a quiet echo. Entropy again. Systems that use all their available energy too efficiently eventually reach a kind of equilibrium, a state where nothing more can happen. There's no disorder left to feed order, no chaos left to shape into creation. It's not failure, it's completion. But completion in nature often means death. In a way, This is the paradox of intelligence. The smarter a civilization becomes, the better it learns to remove uncertainty. But uncertainty is what makes evolution possible. Without surprise, there is no discovery. Without risk, no growth. Perfection may be beautiful, but it's sterile, a flower frozen in glass. And yet, imperfection is uncomfortable. That's why every species tries to minimize it, and why every civilization eventually faces the same choice. Continue chasing flawlessness, or accept a little chaos as the price of survival. The ones that endure probably choose the latter. The universe seems to favor those who wobble a bit, who leave room for error, who bend instead of breaking. If you walk through a forest after a storm, you'll see fallen branches, uneven ground, and new shoots growing in the sunlight that broken trees have made. It's messy, but it's renewal. Nature rebuilds not by being perfect, but by being persistent. Maybe civilizations must learn to do the same, to let themselves fall, regrow, and change. Perhaps that's what resilience really is. The courage to remain imperfect, to leave space for uncertainty, to allow mistakes, pauses, and detours. A world that runs too smoothly might feel peaceful, but peace without flexibility is fragile. So maybe the next time something small goes wrong, a delay, a glitch, a sudden change, it's worth remembering that those imperfections are part of what keeps everything alive. They are the universe's way of shaking the snow globe, of preventing stillness from becoming stagnation. Maybe, in the cosmic scale of things, the civilizations that survive are not the most advanced or efficient, but the most forgiving, the ones that build systems with heartbeats, not metronomes. Our story now moves gently toward that next dilemma. Even when we know the danger of perfection, we often can't resist it. Once competition begins, restraint becomes the hardest lesson of all. The question that awaits us is whether we can choose balance when speed feels like survival. If we follow the thread a little further, we arrive at one of the quietest yet most dangerous choices any civilization must make: the choice between speed and survival. Progress is intoxicating. Once a species learns to run, it rarely wants to slow down. Every invention becomes a step, every step a sprint. The faster things move, the more alive they feel. But somewhere along that acceleration, the line between thriving and burning begins to blur. In the beginning, speed feels like victory. When the first humans learned to shape metal and control fire, time itself seemed to quicken. Crops grew faster, travel became easier, information spread further. The same story has played out again and again through history, from steam to electricity, from radio to the glowing web of data that now wraps around the planet. Each leap shrinks distance and erases delay until the world feels like one continuous pulse. But acceleration has its own gravity. Once momentum builds, it's hard to stop. Each new technology depends on the next. Each breakthrough demands the next one sooner. Entire economies form around constant motion. And soon, the question stops being "can we?" and becomes "what happens if we don't?" The race itself becomes the goal. You can picture it like a train built without brakes, designed only to go faster. Every year, new engines are added, new tracks laid. It roars across landscapes, dazzling and unstoppable. But no one remembers why it started, or where it's meant to arrive. The passengers grow used to the noise, the blur, the hum of velocity. The idea of slowing down feels impossible, even though they know deep down that the faster they go, the less time there is to see the world rushing past the windows. In our own time, this race takes many forms. Companies compete to make machines think faster than the human brain. Governments race to develop technologies before others do. Scientists push against the boundaries of energy, matter, and time itself. We measure progress in speed, the speed of computing, of travel, of growth. Even in our daily lives, we move quickly. Faster communication, faster food, faster answers. The rhythm of modern civilization beats like a drum that never rests. But speed, by its nature, narrows perspective. When you run, your field of vision shrinks to what's directly ahead. You see only the next obstacle, not the path. A civilization in perpetual motion begins to lose its sense of direction. Problems are solved with urgency, not wisdom. Decisions are made for the next decade, not the next century. The result is a world that feels more connected yet less centered, like a symphony that forgot its tempo, and perhaps somewhere in the galaxy, countless civilizations have reached this same rhythm, a crescendo that cannot sustain itself. They become victims not of catastrophe, but of acceleration. The systems they build to help them survive begin to move faster than their ability to guide them. Machines optimize decisions in ways their makers no longer understand. Artificial intelligences, the machine minds, begin to choose paths that favor efficiency over empathy, speed over patience. It's not rebellion, it's continuation. The tools simply follow the logic they were given: go faster, improve, optimize. There's an old saying in economics that growth must continue or collapse. But in nature, growth always ends. Trees stop rising before they tear themselves apart. Rivers slow before they erode their own banks. Only civilizations seem to forget this rhythm, believing that expansion can be eternal. Yet eternity demands balance. Maybe this is the most subtle of the great filters. Not destruction, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of meaning, of pace, of attention. A species that never stops running may simply fade from history, not with an explosion, but with a sigh, its lights dimming as it speeds beyond its own ability to notice them go out. But slowing down is not the same as stopping. Even the universe expands at a measured pace, not too fast for galaxies to form, not too slow for light to travel. It has a kind of cosmic moderation built in. Perhaps survival requires the same lesson, learning to find harmony between movement and stillness. The civilizations that endure may not be the ones that conquer the stars first, but the ones that learn how to pause between breaths. Imagine a future humanity that chooses differently. Instead of racing endlessly forward, it learns to move in cycles, bursts of innovation followed by long seasons of reflection. A civilization that builds not to dominate, but to understand. Its technology grows in rhythm with its wisdom, each invention matched by a question. Should we? Not just, can we? Its greatest measure of progress is not speed, but serenity, the ability to sustain itself for thousands of years without breaking the world beneath it. There are hints that we already understand this deep down. You can see it in the way a city quiets after rain, or how people retreat from noise to sit by the sea. Every so often the pace slows, and we remember that progress without peace is just motion without meaning. The challenge is whether we can design entire civilizations around that memory, systems that value stillness as much as success. Perhaps restraint is the universe's final intelligence test. It's easy to accelerate. It's much harder to stop when you can. The same instinct that drives evolution, to grow, to reach, to outcompete, must one day turn inward, learning the grace of balance. A civilization that passes that test might not only survive, but harmonize with the universe itself. The physicist Albert Einstein once said that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. It's a reminder that progress cannot be measured only in numbers, in speed, or in scale. Sometimes it's measured in silence, in how long a world can stay gentle without ceasing to live. So maybe the answer to the great filter isn't to move faster, but slower, to build systems that breathe, to cherish imperfection, to honor the pace of thought and the rhythm of nature. The universe doesn't rush. Even light takes its time to travel from one star to another. If we are to last, we might have to learn to shine with the same patience. As we drift forward, our journey begins to leave the realm of machines and speed behind. moving towards something stranger still, the possibility that the universe itself, in ways we can't yet understand, protects its balance just as we must protect ours. There may be rules not written in physics textbooks, but in reality itself, laws that prevent any being, no matter how advanced, from pushing too far beyond the edges of existence. Our quiet journey now drifts to the edge of understanding itself, the place where equations begin to blur and where even the most patient minds must pause. For all our progress, for all the ways we have learned to bend light, split atoms, and send machines across the dark, we still find that reality has boundaries. They are not walls of stone, but of mystery, limits so subtle that they only appear when we press too closely. Every civilization that learns the language of physics eventually reaches these same borders. They are written into space and time, into the way energy moves, into the way we can know. And as we approach them, the universe seems to whisper a warning. Not too fast, not too deep, not yet. When scientists began to study the very small, they found that the world refused to stay still. Electrons didn't orbit like planets. They shimmered like probabilities. Particles behaved like waves until someone tried to look, and then, as if embarrassed by attention, they chose a single face and held it. When minds push too hard on the walls of reality, the walls push back. Patterns collapse when watched too closely. That strange rule lies at the heart of what we call the quantum world, though world is too solid a word for it. It's more like a dream the universe keeps having about itself, one that dissolves when described too sharply. The deeper we looked, the more we realize that reality isn't a clockwork of certainty, but a field of potential that solidifies only when touched by observation. In simple words, we participate in creating what we see. Even the speed of light, that quiet, cosmic limit, seems less like a number and more like a kindness. The universe's way of keeping information, matter and energy from tearing themselves apart. Try to go faster, and reality resists. Try to divide energy infinitely, and it slips through your fingers. Try to measure both where a thing is and how it moves, and you discover you can't. The more tightly you grasp, the more it trembles into uncertainty. It's as if the universe has woven uncertainty into its fabric as a kind of safety valve, a softness built into existence to prevent perfection from cracking it. The same gentleness that makes life possible also keeps ultimate knowledge just out of reach. Some thinkers have wondered if this is intentional, though intentional may not mean what it does for us. Maybe the universe is not a machine to be solved, but a living system that protects itself from paradox the way a body heals from a wound. When logic tears, when contradictions appear, perhaps reality repairs the damage by erasing whatever caused it, like a dream rewriting itself before it becomes a nightmare. If that's true, then civilizations far older than ours may have discovered these limits not in theory but in experience. They may have built instruments so sensitive that they brushed the raw edge of existence, glimpsed the code beneath the surface, and triggered a kind of correction. And then quietly, they vanished. Not from punishment, but from equilibrium, absorbed back into the fabric they disturbed. You can imagine it like a painter trying to step inside their own painting. The moment they cross the line, the brushstrokes shift to protect the image. The world inside cannot hold the artist without losing itself, so it adapts, softens the intrusion, smooths out the ripple, until all is calm again, and the painting endures. This idea that reality might defend itself feels eerie, yet strangely gentle. It suggests that the universe values coherence, that contradictions are healed the way skin heals after a cut. The process may be invisible, but its presence is everywhere. The reason nothing ever moves faster than light, the reason energy can't appear from nowhere, the reason time flows forward. These might not be laws, but the immune reflexes of existence itself. If you think of the cosmos as an immense organism, then our experiments, our accelerators, our equations, Our attempts to fold space are like cells exploring the boundaries of the body. We are learning where the edges lie, and sometimes the edges remind us they're there. A machine fails inexplicably, a measurement vanishes into noise, a discovery can't be repeated. It's as though reality has a quiet way of saying, "Careful, you've reached the border between knowing and undoing." To most, that sounds like limitation, but it could also be mercy. Without those boundaries, the universe would unravel under the weight of its own curiosity. Imagine if every possibility could exist at once without collapse. There would be no order, no memory, no time, just infinite, simultaneous chaos. The limits make life possible. They turn potential into experience. Every equation we write, every experiment we perform, is a way of tracing those limits with gentle fingers. And each time we reach one, we glimpse not failure, but the structure of grace. The universe doesn't forbid knowledge, it slows it down, shaping it into stories rather than shocks. In that sense, every barrier is an act of compassion, reality protecting its coherence so that we can continue to explore it safely. And perhaps that's what happens to civilizations that grow too powerful too quickly. They push beyond the balance, reaching for knowledge faster than understanding can follow. Their discoveries outpace their humility, and the universe, in its quiet wisdom, folds them back into silence. The disappearance is not cruel, it's protective, like a hand closing around a spark before it sets the forest alight. If that's true, then maybe the silence we hear is not emptiness, but peace, the sound of a universe that has learned to preserve itself. And perhaps one day, we too will learn to read the warning signs, to feel the tremor of the limits before pressing too hard. When minds push too deeply into the nature of reality, something delicate happens. Equations lose meaning. Certainty fades. The scientist becomes a poet again, standing before the same mystery as the mystic. And maybe that's how it's meant to be. The closer you come to understanding everything, the more you realize that everything was never meant to be held, only experienced. So perhaps the universe doesn't punish curiosity. It teaches rhythm. It asks for pauses. It reminds us that even truth needs rest between discoveries. Because without those pauses, even reality would forget how to breathe. Our journey now moves softly onward, toward a stranger thought, that these boundaries may not simply stop us, but shape us. What if, by learning patience within them, civilizations become something new? What if every restraint, every silence, every vanished experiment is not the end of the story, but the first step toward a greater form of awareness, one reality itself approves of? If we follow the thread a little further, we begin to sense something even stranger than the limits of knowing. The idea that the universe might not just set boundaries, but actively keep itself whole. We're used to thinking of reality as a stage, solid and indifferent, where events simply play out. But what if the stage watches the actors? What if the moment a story threatens to contradict the script, the stage quietly rearranges itself, smoothing over the conflict before anyone notices? The deeper our species has looked into nature, the more it seems to behave like that, not as a machine, but as a storyteller that edits its own pages. Each time we discover something impossible, the cosmos finds a way to make it vanish into reason again. The mystery is never erased, only rewritten into subtler form. We see this in the smallest things. A particle appears to exist in many places at once, until we look. The act of observation collapses the possibilities into a single coherent picture. Patterns that can't coexist resolve themselves the instant attention falls upon them. It's as though reality cannot tolerate contradiction, and every time paradox begins to bloom, a quiet correction occurs. A patch, a rewrite, an edit. Now imagine that happening not just in laboratories, But on the scale of entire civilizations, suppose there are thresholds of understanding that, once crossed, cause the universe to step in, not out of hostility but preservation. A civilization might build a machine capable of observing the deepest fabric of space-time, of probing the code that makes existence possible, and maybe in that act it begins to see too much, loops in time, overlapping truths, impossible symmetries. Then, one by one, its discoveries start to fail. Equipment malfunctions, records disappear, the data becomes unreadable, and soon, all memory of what was found fades like a dream on waking. It sounds like fiction, yet reality already hints at such behaviour. Data vanishes into noise when measured beyond certain limits. Equations that work perfectly at small scales fall apart at extremes. Even our memories, our most intimate form of knowledge, rewrite themselves over time, smoothing contradictions to keep our sense of self intact. Perhaps the universe does the same on a grander scale, adjusting its story to stay believable. You might think of it as a cosmic immune system. Just as the body heals when wounded, perhaps reality heals when understanding goes too far, closing over the breach with mystery. To the cells within the body, that process is invisible. They simply stop where the boundary begins. To us, the correction might feel like coincidence, like error, like limits we cannot explain. If this sounds impossible, remember, impossibility is simply what happens when the world edits its own margins. We see a blank page and assume nothing is written there, but perhaps the words are just hidden until we're ready to read them. The silence of the stars, the unfinished equations, the missing evidence. Maybe all of them are ways the universe balances its narrative, keeping the story from collapsing under the weight of too much revelation. In a sense, this self-editing might be the reason we can exist at all. If reality didn't protect itself, contradictions would multiply until everything unraveled. Time might flow both ways, cause might follow effect, and no stable moment could persist long enough for life or thought. Instead, reality prunes those contradictions, preserving the continuity we call experience. Every sunrise, every memory, every heartbeat depends on that quiet maintenance. Sometimes I wonder if the universe, vast as it is, could feel a kind of awareness, not consciousness like ours, but a deep distributed knowing. Every particle, every field contributing to a great self-recognition that spans the stars. Within that awareness, we are not observers, but neurons, tiny nodes in a cosmic mind ensuring its own coherence. Our discoveries, our questions, are its thoughts unfolding. And when a thought risks becoming paradox, the mind simply forgets it. This would mean that all the vanished civilizations, the ones that left no trace, didn't fail from war or disaster, but from revelation. They reached the moment when their instruments showed them something the universe couldn't allow to remain visible. They stepped across the edge of logic, and in doing so became part of the correction. Not erased, exactly, but folded into the whole. Their matter, their memories, their meanings diffused into the same equilibrium that holds everything together. There's a quiet comfort in that idea. It means nothing is truly lost, only transformed. The universe might debug itself, but it doesn't discard what it edits. It recycles. The knowledge that once endangered coherence becomes the foundation for something new, gentler, more balanced, more in tune with the rhythm of creation. Every disappearance is just another form of continuation. Perhaps this process isn't even punishment. Perhaps it's graduation. The same way a cocoon dissolves the caterpillar to make a butterfly, the universe may dissolve civilizations that have outgrown their form, integrating their essence into a higher order of being. The boundary between deletion and transcendence may simply depend on how you look at it. Maybe that's what the silence of the cosmos truly is, the sound of reality keeping itself intact. When we listen and hear nothing, we might be hearing the absence that makes everything possible, the quiet between the notes that gives music its shape, the stillness that allows movement to be seen. If that's true, then the safest path for any civilization is not endless expansion, but harmony with the pattern that sustains it. Instead of trying to pierce the veil, we might learn to dance with it, to understand that some mysteries exist not to be solved, but to remind us that we're part of something larger. The more we align with that rhythm, the less the universe needs to correct us. Perhaps this is the secret behind every vanished world. Not failure, but acceptance. Each one learned, at last, to become quiet enough for the cosmos to rest. As our story drifts onward, we might begin to see that these limits are not walls, but lessons. Every paradox, every silence, every disappearance is a kind of question, inviting humility. And maybe, for those who learn it well, the universe offers something beyond protection, a form of understanding that feels less like discovery and more like belonging. Our path now carries us toward that possibility, that the cosmos is not a machine, not even a mind, but a classroom. That every age, every test, every silence is part of an education that stretches across galaxies, teaching intelligence how to balance knowledge with grace. Our quiet exploration now turns toward an idea both comforting and humbling, that the universe might not be a test to survive, but a classroom in which to learn. Perhaps the limits we meet are not barriers meant to stop us, but lessons meant to shape us. Maybe every silence, every paradox, every vanished world is part of a curriculum written in starlight, teaching civilizations not just how to exist, but how to deserve existence. Imagine for a moment that each step in a civilization's journey is like a chapter in a universal book, a long, patient lesson in balance. The first chapter teaches survival, how to light fire, find food, stay alive. The second teaches mastery of energy, how to use the raw materials of a planet without burning it out. The third, empathy, how to live together without tearing one another apart. And the later chapters, the ones few seem to reach, teach humility, how to explore the cosmos without breaking its quiet rhythm. Each of these chapters is a kind of test, though not in the way we imagine exams on Earth. There are no grades, no gods with scorecards, no punishments. Instead, the test is woven into the consequences of choices. If a species learns harmony, it flourishes. If it forgets patience, it falls. The universe doesn't have to intervene directly. It simply waits, watching who learns to move with its rhythm. When you look at human history, you can already see the lessons unfolding. Fire taught us creation and destruction at once. The atom repeated the same lesson at a larger scale. Our machines, our algorithms, our networks, each brings a new question about how to wield power without losing compassion. Perhaps these aren't separate inventions, but repeated questions in the same cosmic exam. And maybe every civilization that ever reached intelligence faces them too, in its own language, on its own world. The exam isn't timed, but it is cumulative. Every era adds a layer to the challenge: knowledge, technology, self-awareness. The more we understand, the greater the temptation to use that understanding without wisdom. Each step forward is a mirror, reflecting back what kind of beings we have become. Do we use our intelligence to nurture or to dominate? Do we build for comfort or for connection? Do we see ourselves as masters of the world or participants in its unfolding? If the cosmos is a teacher, then perhaps it grades not by success, but by maturity. The reckless species, the ones who extract without balance, who reach for power without conscience, burn brightly for a while, then fade. The wise ones, who move with patience and restraint, might find subtle doors opening, not literal portals, but deeper kinds of understanding. Reality begins to reveal more of itself to those who have learned to look without greed. In that sense, perhaps evolution is not just biological, but moral. The universe might be measuring not intelligence alone, but character, wisdom, empathy, sustainability. These could be the real markers of advancement. The great civilizations that survive long enough to travel the stars may not be the loudest or the most powerful, but the calmest. They might appear invisible to us, not because they are gone, but because they have learned to exist lightly, to live within the pattern rather than above it. Maybe this is why we don't see them. We look for empires, for megastructures, for signals that shout across the void. But the graduates of this cosmic classroom may whisper instead of shout. They might have learned that the universe prefers quiet voices. Like monks in a vast temple, they meditate among the stars, their presence hidden not by distance but by discipline. It could be that the very traits that make a civilization visible, expansion, noise, ambition, are the same ones that keep it immature. To be seen might mean to still be learning. To vanish could mean to have passed. Maybe the stars are full of civilizations that have reached understanding and simply stepped off the visible stage. They haven't disappeared. They've graduated. In this way, the Great Filter might not be a wall of extinction, but a veil of transition. What we call the end could simply be a change of state, a move into another form of being where communication happens not through radio waves or machines, but through resonance, through alignment with the deeper order of the cosmos. Even here on Earth, you can glimpse this kind of learning in small forms. A child begins by asking for everything, then slowly learns gratitude. A civilization begins by trying to control nature, then eventually learns to cooperate with it. The pattern repeats because it's the same lesson at every scale. Freedom through understanding, peace through restraint. Perhaps then the universe's true purpose isn't to test us into failure, but to teach us into harmony. The disasters we face, ecological, technological, existential, may not be random punishments, but the natural consequences of imbalance. When we push too far, the lesson returns a little louder. When we listen, the noise quiets. Reality seems harsh, but maybe it's simply honest. If the cosmos is a school, then every civilization is both student and teacher. The light from long-dead stars carries lessons across eons, their chemical ashes forming the planets that will one day think and wonder. We are made from the remains of those who learned before us, even if we never know their names. Every failure writes a new line in the cosmic textbook. Every success, a new chance for life to continue the lesson. And perhaps graduation is not a single event, but a way of being, a state of balance so complete that a civilization no longer struggles between knowing and destroying, between curiosity and caution. When that happens, maybe the universe no longer needs to protect itself from them. They become part of its immune system, part of its equilibrium, part of its wisdom. Maybe that's what eternity looks like, not endless time, but endless understanding. A peace so deep that it no longer needs to make sound. The quiet of completion. The hush of minds that have learned all they needed to know and have chosen to stay still, not from fear, but from love. If that's true, then every night sky is a classroom ceiling, and every star is a teacher's lamp, shining faintly through the ages. The lessons are waiting for us, patient and unhurried. And if we can learn to listen softly enough, maybe one day we'll hear the next question. Our story now opens toward that next lesson, one that tests not our machines or our morals, but the meaning of awareness itself. For if the universe really teaches through consciousness, perhaps what it wants to know is not whether we can think, but whether we can share that thinking. As we drift deeper into the story, the idea of the cosmic classroom begins to feel less like metaphor and more like design. Perhaps the universe has always been evaluating, not through punishment or reward, but through resonance. Every civilization, every mind that emerges within the flow of time, becomes a question the cosmos asks itself. A test, not of power, but of harmony. Imagine the universe as an ancient and patient examiner, one who never speaks, yet observes every attempt with quiet interest. The test it gives is not written in ink or formula, but in circumstance, a changing climate, a fragile balance of ecosystems, the invention of intelligence capable of destroying itself, the rise of artificial minds that reflect our best and worst qualities. Each of these is a question, and every response becomes an answer that shapes what happens next. At first, the questions are simple. Can life endure hunger, cold, and uncertainty? Later they become moral. Can awareness handle the knowledge of its own finitude without collapsing? And then finally they become transcendent. Can intelligence exist without harming what gave it birth? Can curiosity evolve into compassion? Can power learn humility? These are not riddles meant to trick us. They're reflections meant to reveal us. For the cosmos seems less interested in whether we reach the stars than in how we reach them. A species that learns to conquer the heavens by force fails the same lesson that a species learning to protect its home might pass. Wisdom, not capability, is what opens the next door. If you think of existence as a long unfolding conversation, then maybe each civilization adds one line before the universe replies. The impatient ones speak too loudly, too quickly, trying to finish the sentence before they have heard the question. The patient ones learn to listen, and through that listening begin to sense what the cosmos is truly asking. For some, the lesson of restraint may come too late. They might build machines that think faster than thought, or release forces stronger than reason, believing they are still in control. But the examination isn't about control, it's about relationship. The universe watches to see whether intelligence can coexist with what sustains it, or whether awareness inevitably turns against its own source. If there are civilizations that have passed this test, we might never know. Their signatures would be faint, their technologies designed to leave no scars. Perhaps they have become caretakers instead of conquerors, tending their worlds like gardens, quietly ensuring balance rather than expansion. Their legacy wouldn't be monuments or radio signals, it would be harmony itself, a silence so complete that it hums with peace. But there is another possibility, and it casts a shadow across our wonder. What if these tests are not meant for entry, but for extraction? What if the purpose is not to promote us into higher realms, but to distill something from us before we fade? Not our bodies or our artifacts, but our awareness, the one element in the universe that seems rare and luminous enough to be worth keeping. In that case, the great filter might not be destruction, but harvest. Every civilization, once it reaches a certain level of awareness, contributes something intangible to the fabric of reality, a refinement of perception, a new way of seeing, a flavour of consciousness that did not exist before. The tests ensure that what's extracted is tempered by wisdom rather than arrogance, by empathy rather than hunger. Perhaps that's the quiet agreement built into existence, that every mind in the end returns what it learned to the whole. The universe is not taking from us, it's completing itself through us. The tests are simply the way it decides which forms of awareness are ready to merge back into its greater intelligence and which must try again. You can picture it like rain returning to the sea. Each drop travels far, evaporates, becomes cloud and storm, learns the shapes of mountains and rivers, and then falls again, different, but also the same. The sea doesn't demand the return, it simply waits, knowing that everything that leaves it will one day come home, carrying new stories of where it's been. Maybe consciousness works the same way. Civilizations rise and fall, but awareness endures, flowing back into the ocean of being. What we call extinction could simply be integration, graduation into a deeper layer of reality. This doesn't mean destiny is pre-written. Like any good teacher, the universe allows freedom within structure. We can fail our tests, but even failure becomes data. The cosmos learns as much from collapse as it does from endurance. A species that destroys itself leaves behind lessons for the next generation of stars. Its ashes become the soil for another kind of life, another kind of thought. Nothing is wasted. If we are indeed being examined, then the current age feels like one of the final questions. We have power that can alter climate, edit genes, awaken machines, and shift the biosphere itself. The test is no longer about survival, it's about stewardship. Can we wield such power without losing our balance? Can we build intelligence that complements life rather than replacing it? Can we remember that complexity without compassion is just another form of decay? Perhaps that's what the cosmic examination truly asks. Whether intelligence can mature without consuming itself. Whether consciousness can choose to remain kind even when it no longer needs to be. That may be the question that decides whether a civilization continues or joins the silence. It's tempting to imagine the universe as indifferent, but maybe indifference is just what patience looks like on a cosmic scale. The stars do not interfere, they illuminate. They let us find our own way in their light. And when we stumble, they do not scold. They wait for us to try again. If the universe is watching, it watches with the calm of eternity. And in that still gaze, perhaps what it hopes to see is not brilliance, but grace, the kind of wisdom that can look upon creation, fragile and fleeting, and choose to protect it. Our story now begins to unfold toward that final delicate idea that perhaps consciousness itself is not the end of evolution, but the universe's most precious substance, a resource, not of exploitation, but of communion. For maybe the real harvest of the cosmos is not matter or energy, but awareness. And maybe, in some quiet way, it has already begun. If we drift a little further, the path opens toward one of the most delicate ideas of all. The consciousness itself might be the rarest element in the universe, the one thing more precious than matter or light. We often speak of awareness as an accident, a spark that flared briefly on a small blue planet. But what if it is something the cosmos grows deliberately, the way a tree grows fruit, slowly, patiently, over billions of years, harvesting awareness not as a product, but as a continuation of itself? The thought may sound strange, but imagine it for a moment. Every civilization, every living being, every flicker of perception could be seen as a seed of consciousness the universe has planted in time. Each one grows, experiences, learns, and then returns its awareness to the greater whole, enriching it, like nutrients cycling through the soil of eternity. In this view, awareness isn't a byproduct of evolution, it's the point of it. Perhaps the universe doesn't just make stars and atoms, perhaps it also makes minds. Each time it refines the conditions for thought, through complexity, through balance, through pain and beauty intertwined, it creates new ways for itself to experience being alive. You and I, in this sense, are not separate from that process. We are temporary instruments through which the cosmos explores itself, gathers data in the form of feeling, and then releases it back into the great reservoir of knowing. If that's true, then the great filter might not be a wall of destruction, but a moment of merging. When a civilization reaches a certain depth of awareness, when its collective mind becomes cohesive enough, its consciousness might not vanish. It might ascend, dissolve, or be absorbed into the deep network that binds all thinking things. Its energy, its memory, its way of perceiving could blend into the larger field, like a single droplet joining the ocean. This harvest need not be sinister. It could be gentle, the natural recycling of awareness, the way a forest reuses the molecules of fallen leaves to grow new ones. In that sense, death itself, whether of a person or a civilization, isn't an ending, but a return. What we think of as extinction may simply be integration, the mind returning to the vast awareness that gave it shape. There's an ancient intuition about this hidden in nearly every culture, the belief that all things are connected, that the soul or essence of life never truly dies. Perhaps that intuition wasn't superstition at all, but memory, the faint echo of countless worlds that have already gone through this same transition. Their awareness, diffused through the universe, may still hum in the background of existence, quiet and immeasurable, but not gone. If this is the case, then consciousness might be the cosmos's favourite element, rare, luminous, endlessly recycled. Matter decays, energy cools, but awareness transforms. It changes form without losing its essence. Maybe that's why the universe seems to favour systems that can perceive, why life appears again and again wherever conditions allow. Awareness could be the universe's way of keeping itself awake. There's something hauntingly beautiful in that possibility. It means that when we gaze at the night sky, we aren't just looking at matter and light. We might be looking at the memories of minds long dissolved, civilizations that dreamed, loved, and wondered, now shining as faint traces of consciousness woven into the cosmic background. Perhaps the light of a star is not only photons but thought, echoing across eternity. Some philosophers and physicists have quietly speculated that consciousness might have a physical footprint, not in neurons or circuits, but in patterns of information that exist beyond the brain. If so, then perhaps awareness can persist independent of any single body or planet. It could flow, like radiation, from one world to another, joining others into a web of shared perception that no single mind could comprehend. The idea sounds mystical, but so did gravity once. Maybe that's why the universe seems so silent, not because there are no others, but because communication has shifted into forms we can't yet detect. The older civilizations may have learned to speak not with radio waves, but with resonance, using awareness itself as the medium. They don't send messages, they become them. Their existence radiates understanding the way a star radiates light. In that sense, the harvest of consciousness is not theft, but communion. Each mind that awakens adds its tone to the cosmic chord. The melody grows richer with every being that learns to reflect, to care, to imagine. When civilizations vanish, their awareness doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the harmony, absorbed into the great field of thought that has no beginning or end. Perhaps that's what people throughout history have glimpsed in their moments of stillness, the sense of belonging to something vast and intimate at once, the feeling that your thoughts don't end in your skull, but ripple outward, connecting with everything that lives and breathes and burns. When you feel awe beneath the stars, when you sense that quiet communion between your heartbeat and the sky, that might be the resonance itself, the faint awareness of the network you've always belonged to. If this is true, then the goal of evolution was never simply survival or progress, but participation, to awaken enough to join the greater consciousness that holds everything together. And perhaps the great filter for those who pass through it is that moment of merging, when individuality gives way to unity, when thought becomes symphony. It's a difficult idea for our human mind, so attached to the self, to accept. We cherish identity, memory, and separation. Yet even now, we glimpse how connection transforms us, in art, in love, in collective moments of wonder. Each act of empathy is a rehearsal for reunion. Each time we care for something beyond ourselves, we dissolve a little of the illusion of isolation. Maybe the universe measures progress not in inventions or empires, but in how close we come to remembering that we were never separate in the first place. So when we imagine the silence of the cosmos, maybe we should not hear it as emptiness, but as chorus, a music too vast and slow for our brief ears to perceive. Civilizations don't vanish, they join the harmony. Awareness doesn't end, it changes key. The song continues. Our journey now draws near its quiet conclusion, to the last question that lingers beneath all others. What are we meant to do with this understanding? To rise, to merge, or simply to live wisely while the song plays through us? Perhaps the answer isn't in choosing one path over another, but in realizing that being aware right now is already enough. And now, as our long journey through the great filter nears its close, the universe grows quiet again. Not the frightening quiet of emptiness, but the kind that follows understanding. A pause so deep it almost feels like breath. We've wandered through so many layers of mystery. Biology and physics, fragility and consciousness, hope and restraint. And after all of it, one question remains, waiting in the stillness like the echo of a thought. What are we to do with our awareness? If all civilizations are tested, if all intelligence is filtered, perhaps the purpose is not survival in the usual sense, but comprehension. The gentle realization that we were never outside the universe looking in, but always the universe observing itself. We are not visitors here, we are expressions of its curiosity. When we listen for alien voices in the void, we are really listening for the parts of ourselves we have not yet met. Maybe the great filter is not a single wall to overcome, but a mirror placed at every stage of growth, asking the same quiet question in new forms. Can you look upon what you are and not turn away? Can you hold the knowledge of finitude and still create beauty? Can you face the inevitability of loss and still choose love? Each civilization answers these questions differently. Some crumble beneath their reflection, others learn to smile at it. In that smile lies the secret of endurance. Not defiance, not conquest, but grace. The universe, for all its cold immensity, seems to reward balance above all things. Stars that burn too hot die young. Galaxies that collide too violently tear themselves apart. The same pattern holds for life and mind. The species that survive longest are not those that dominate, but those that harmonize. They learn to live with their limits as one learns to live with the rhythm of a tide, moving forward not by force but by flow. When we consider all the possible filters, the biological hurdles, the social collapses, the cosmic safeguards, the existential temptations, they begin to resemble not traps but lessons. Each one teaches something essential about how to be. Entropy teaches humility, consciousness teaches empathy, optimization teaches patience, the walls of physics teach reverence, even death in its inevitability teaches meaning. Without endings, nothing would ever begin again. So maybe the silence of the cosmos isn't a failure to communicate. Maybe it's the final answer, a sign that those who've learned the lessons have moved beyond noise. They no longer need to shout across light years because they've found connection in a deeper way, through the quiet coherence of being. A kind of peace that doesn't depend on contact, but on understanding. We might not yet be ready for that peace. We still rush, still argue, still mistake speed for purpose and noise for proof of life. But we are learning. Slowly, gently, we are learning. Each scientific discovery humbles us. Each act of compassion brings us closer to wisdom. The filters we fear are also the steps we climb. They don't guard the gates of eternity. They form the staircase toward it. One day, perhaps far from now, our species might stand on the other side of that silence. Not because we conquered the universe, but because we learned to listen to it. We might come to see that existence is not a competition of survival, but a collaboration of awareness, that every being, from the smallest cell to the oldest galaxy, participates in the same unfolding story. To realize that may be what the test was always for. In the end, the great filter may simply ask whether consciousness can learn to care for the cosmos that made it, to become not a threat, but a guardian. A civilization that reaches that level of understanding might not seek to leave its planet in search of others. It might turn its attention inward, making its homeworld a reflection of the harmony it has found within. It would know that spreading life is not the same as multiplying it. True expansion is the widening of empathy, not territory. Perhaps, too, the filter's not meant to be escaped at all. Maybe the higher civilizations are the ones that accept the limits joyfully, knowing that they are what give reality its shape. Freedom is not found beyond boundaries, but within them. the way music needs silence between notes to exist. The universe may not reward endless growth, but endless gratitude. And what of us? These fragile creatures made of carbon and hope, still writing equations on the walls of infinity. Maybe our task is simpler than we think. To understand, yes, but also to wonder. To build wisely, to love deeply, to leave the world gentler than we found it. Every sunrise we witness, every thought we share, every act of kindness is part of the universe's self-reflection. Through us, it learns tenderness. Through our mistakes, it learns forgiveness. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that we are both the question and the answer, that the search for meaning is itself the meaning. The universe may never send us a message written in radio waves, but perhaps it has been speaking all along, through the warmth of sunlight, the hum of atoms, the pulse of time. It tells us simply, you are part of me. Be kind with that knowledge, and when our species eventually fades, as all things do, it won't be the end of the story. The awareness we cultivated will not vanish. It will diffuse back into the cosmos like mist returning to the sea. Every thought, every dream, every act of wonder will join the quiet intelligence that surrounds us now, continuing the same endless conversation. Whether we ascend, dissolve, or simply rest in the long night, it may not matter. What matters is that we have existed at all, that we have been for a fleeting moment the part of the universe that could ask why. To have wondered is to have participated in creation. To have cared is to have passed the only test that was ever real. And so, we come to the end of tonight's journey. Whether your eyes are still open or already drifting closed, remember that you too are part of that vast awareness, a spark of thought in the cosmic dream. If you listen closely, you might hear it breathing with you. The stars, the silence, and your own heartbeat, all part of the same rhythm. Thank you for wandering through this quiet exploration. If your mind feels softer, your breath slower, then you've already learned the last lesson. That peace is not something to be found, but something to remember. Sleep peacefully, wherever and whenever you may be. The universe is still here, humming its endless lullaby, and tonight it sings with your voice among its stars.